Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Cult Cinema 83. This is episode 16 of the Cult Cinema podcast, and I'm once again joined today by James from Poliziotteschi and Gialli Reviews. So, James, how are you and how have you been?
I am well. I've been doing all right. I've been enjoying the weather as it's been warming up over here.
Oh yeah, I mean we've had a heat wave over here, which is pretty crazy actually. I think it was like 28 degrees Celsius.
Oh wow!
In April, so there you go. There is, I guess, there is climate change for you, but you know, it is what it is. So yeah, pretty crazy. So, but yeah, welcome back, and thank you for once again doing this with me.
Of course.
So yeah, today we thought it would be fun to go back to the Poliziotteschi genre, of course. And we are going to talk about and discuss two movies of DUCCIO TESSARI, actually, which is, I think, a very interesting filmmaker because he basically started out his career as a screenwriter for Peplums, basically, and Sword and Sandal films, which is, you know, it's kind of strange because they seem to have sort of like disappeared from existence like altogether. Like it's like they're locked away in like some sort of secret vault or whatever, because we haven't like had any like physical media releases or whatever at all. So it almost seems to be like a forgotten genre. Like what do you think that is about? You know, why haven't we heard so much about, you know, peplums anymore?
I don't know. That's a good question. And maybe it's just because like there's just a decade difference between that and like the genres we're talking about here. And you know, 60s versus early 60s versus early 70s. It's a pretty big cultural political shift. So maybe that's part of it. And they just feel like they're 50 years older than these films. I'm not sure. But, you know, I haven't watched that many. I've watched a couple of the Baba ones because he was one of those guys that was doing them. But beyond that, I don't even know if I've watched 10. So, it's one of those genres that maybe there's some great stuff there that, you know, is ripe for discovery. Maybe Blu-rays 10 years from now, and they're like, oh God, another Peplum film. But I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, it could be that just those movies just aren't that interesting, you know, when you compare it to Giallos or whatever, or, you know, Poliziotteschi's or even Westerns. Because, you know, most of those movies are basically like just sumo wrestlers like fighting each other. It's like, it's kind of funny, but yeah, I don't know, maybe one day we'll see them, you know, return in some form or another on a disc or whatever. But anyway, I thought I'd throw the question or the topic at the start of the podcast this time because, you know, like you said, at some
Sure.
you have to be somewhere else at some point. So, you know, I figured I'd start with that one. So let's just dive into it. The movies we are going to talk about are Death Occurred Last Night and Tony Arzenta, of course. So which movie would you like to start with?
Let's start with Tony Arzenta. That's a film I know a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right, so Tony Arzenta, which was released in 1973, I believe, yes, at the kind of at the high water mark of the Poliziotteschi era, of course. So a quick little synopsis here. A mob hitman wants to retire, but his bosses don't think that's a good idea, leading to many complications as chaos ensues. Yeah, that's basically what happens. As it does in most Poliziotteschi's, but we'll get there. So, yeah, Tony Arzenta. I'm just gonna say it off the bat before I throw it over to you. Like, this is one of my favorite Poliziotteschi's in the whole genre. I'm just gonna say it up front. This movie is fantastic in my mind. But I'll let you start. Before, of course, we go into positives and stuff. What are some of your main thoughts about Tony Arzenta?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this film too. Like you, it is one of my favorites of the genre as well. So perhaps we see pretty eye to eye on this one. I've seen some people call it as sort of like the European 70s John Wick. And on a surface level, I sort of get that too. I also like kind of just the scope of it. A lot of the Poliziotteschi, they're like smaller, grittier. They're set in like one place, often Milan or something like that. And this one just kind of has a much bigger scope. And it feels like you're kind of doing a little bit of, I'm not sure if it's globe-trotting, but trotting around Europe. You go to Northern Europe. You go, I think, to Switzerland, somewhere like that. So it's really from like kind of the boot of Italy all the way up north to like Copenhagen. So that's another thing that I think really does stand out and makes this film stand out in particular with kind of more of those like Milan or Naples set Italian Poliziotteschi that they were cranking out.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely unique in that way. I mean, you used the term. I think it does have a bit of globe-trotting going on, which gives it, I guess, a bit more of an epic feel than like most Poliziotteschi do. Yeah, which is very interesting. And of course, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it. Of course, we have a very big actor as the main lead, which doesn't happen as often as well. So in Poliziotteschi, at least not on that level, I guess. But yeah, I mean, Tony Arzenta, I think this is actually one of the first Poliziotteschi that I've ever seen, like when I was younger, when I started discovering the whole genre. And I didn't know anything about like, foreign films or whatever. I didn't even know like Alain Delon that much. So it's like, it was very interesting to see like a French actor in like an Italian film. But of course that happened more often than not. Yeah, I mean, I have very good memories of this film. And I think I had like a VHS tape back in the day. Wow. Which is like, I think I watched it as much until like the VHS, like just the tape broke in half. Like, so I literally played it like to death, basically. That's what I remember from it anyway. So yeah, I mean, let's just dive into the movie. Let's start with positives. If you look at this movie, what are some of the things that you really appreciate about Tony Arzenta?
I feel like a lot of these Poliziotteschi can feel a little bit like a dime a dozen, like they're cranking them out and they're just like, they don't have a lot of the details, aren't fully thought through. And I don't feel the same way about this one. It just has little flourishes here and there, and it just really does fully realize its world a little bit more than you're kind of used to for the genre at the time. And maybe it takes having seen a bunch of these to really be able to pick that apart. But I feel like all the hits and the set pieces, I don't think it's exactly the same as like Dario Argento doing like his like slashing set pieces and like the Gialli that he was doing at the time. But you could tell that they were putting a lot of detail into that. You have like even just someone getting shot and like a fish tank. You have like a guy that like gets, we're spoiling a bit, but yeah, we have a guy that gets shot in the train and then he hits like every lamppost. So there's kind of like a mean-spirited cruelty to it that is also a lot of fun. And you can tell that they just didn't half-ass it. They thought these things through and they brought kind of the level of detail just in terms of set design and just sort of choreography to the film.
No, absolutely. And there is like you mentioned, the train scene. There is like a certain amount of grit there where you feel like it's not played for jokes. It is actually, it might be a humorous moment, but it's not like they don't try to do like a comedic version of it, because of course, at heart, this movie is actually very, very serious when it comes to its story anyway. So, but you talk about the cinematography. I mean, that's one of the things that I really, really love about Tony Arzenta, because I love the tone that DUCCIO TESSARI sets with his cinematography, which is done, I think, by Silvano Ippolitis. I probably butchered that, but the whole film, you have the scenery is just filled with mist and rain and gray clouds, and that really indicates what kind of atmosphere DUCCIO is going for with this film, which is of course very downbeat. I think we can agree. And the only scenes that show actual sunlight is like when Tony is like with his parents or whatever, when he's in a safe space.
Yeah.
The rest of the film is just like it has this dirty feel to it. I mean, you feel wet and just like, it's but I really love that atmosphere. How do you see that?
I love it too. I'm glad you brought it up. It's like so many moments come to mind there. It's like the mist where they go to that church and that fog where they're just cranking those fog machines like crazy. But even like the sauna, where that sauna is so sweaty. And you could just feel like the moisture dripping off of people too. It's like they're creating like all of that mood and that atmosphere just in there. And I mean, when they do decide to go to color and have like the colors, I don't know how you watch this, but I suspect you watched it maybe the same way I did with this Radiant Blu-ray. The colors. Oh, yeah, you got a different one. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I turned it around. It's the other cover art. Inside. It's the inside cover.
Oh, okay. Same one. Okay.
So yeah.
I was thrilled when this film came out, and it looks fantastic. Some of like the colors that they're doing there. I think the cinematographer, he did the Great Silence. I think that's probably the film he's most well known for.
I think so, yeah.
Which is fantastic looking too. But yeah, I think he does a A+ job on this film in terms of just like having everything like a distinct feel. It's not like every scene is cranked with like fog or anything. Everywhere is just a little bit different. Like they go to Naples and kind of like you talked about, he's with family and there's a lot more sun and natural lighting and things like that. And you get just really feel of like those Italian streets. It's like even the steps for that church that the scene sort of concludes on. It's just like all those sets are just fantastic.
No, absolutely. No, and of course, not every scene has mist and stuff, but there is just this sort of the film has this sort of like grim look to it, which I actually really appreciate. And like you said, I think you're right. He that was the cinematographer for The Great Silence, and you can see a lot of the same beats in that film as well. Which is The Great Silence is gorgeous as well. So yeah, I mean that's. But I have to say, to continue on to the next thing, I love the story in this film, even though it has been done like so many times. I mean, this is probably like a cliche story that is like beaten to death, basically. But I love how DUCCIO Tessari portrays it here. Because I just dig this whole theme of if you're in bed with the mob, you're not getting out, and no matter how much you want to, and if you try, there's always going to be a price attached, and you make one decision that can cost you like everything, which is exactly what happens with Tony, of course, at the start of it, at the start of the film, which really triggers the narrative, of course. But I'm wondering, how do you feel about that whole theme, story beat of like a revenge story, taking it out on the mob because they stole something from you and whatever, which has been worked over so many times now. But how do you feel about that particular trope, I guess, in general?
Yeah, it's like if someone told me the plot of this, I'd be like, oh, I've seen that film 100 times and it doesn't sound particularly interesting. But I think it's a great example about just how like the different storytelling aspects beyond that kind of skeleton of a plot can really elevate it if you just have different craftsmen working to create like the different characters for Delon and just kind of a lot of the technical details that we just talked about. That those things can really service to elevate something that's pretty, rote, mundane sort of material into something that's really one of the best of the genre, in my opinion. So I think I've read some people's opinions, and it seems to be kind of like go two different ways. There are some people that feel very similar to us that this is definitely one of the genre's best, and there's other ones that just find it to be a little more ordinary. But yeah, I think it's like just all of the details that go into making the film that really do elevate this, even though it has such a familiar, like this has to be one of the most familiar plots, like top 3 or 4 that you could possibly come up with. So it's pretty incredible to me that it can be such a good film despite having such a kind of ordinary skeleton plot.
Yeah, right, exactly. And the thing about people saying it's generality and stuff, like, this movie doesn't go to the extremes as like, for example, Silent Action does, which is a very depressing and downbeat film in the Poliziotteschi genre, or even the Violent Professionals. It doesn't go as dark and depressing as those films are, but I mean, in terms of like what they do with like I said, a pretty rinse wash repeat sort of trope, I think DUCCIO TESSARI really makes it work. And it's definitely not one of the most original things out there in terms of storytelling, but I think it's a very effective one, especially in this one. So yeah, it's but I guess it depends on your personal taste, I guess. That's fair to say, I think. So, but yeah, so let's just continue on from there. I mean, what else do you admire, love about Tony Arzenta?
I just like kind of the contrast to get more into kind of the characters and stuff. Like all of the mob bosses are portrayed, other than perhaps the Richard Conte character, as just like real scumbags and stuff. And so it's like there's not even like really debate of like what they should do with Tony Arzenta when he wants to
No.
Like, yeah, of course, get rid of this schmuck. And so yeah, and then like these guys are so despicable that they get betrayed by like kind of their girlfriends and stuff like that. So I like how just nasty they make them. And then Delon, he's not a very demonstrative actor, but he's very effective at just these kind of like understated, dignified roles. And I think that's exactly what he does here. He doesn't necessarily need a lot of dialogue to convey, but you can tell that he comes across as very dignified, especially when you're contrasting him with like these real assholes, basically, that are these mob bosses. So it's like, yeah, you root for him, and it doesn't take a lot of Delon to say stuff like "I love my family." He can just do it with like these looks and stuff, and I think that speaks to like just what a good presence and what a star he is, that he can convey those things. So that's another thing that really does stand out for me.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. And it's like, it's funny that you mentioned that. I always have this rule, as like a movie critic, film fan, I always have this rule in a movie, like show, don't tell. And like you said, like nowadays, whenever you see a movie or something, every time they have a grieving scene, they have to tell to the audience like that they're grieving and how much they're grieving. And like you said, Alain Delon does it in like facial expressions and just the way that he, his character moves and all of that. So, body language goes a long way. You don't need like a lot of words to express that feeling, and again, show, don't tell, which is very funny. I actually, let me give you an example as to like what a really bad, have you ever seen Moonfall? This is kind of like a sidetrack.
Moonfall.
Yeah, it's directed by Roland.
I'm not sure.
Directed by Roland Emmerich. He made Independence Day.
Oh, I don't believe I've seen it now.
Okay, well, anyway, it's basically a disaster movie about the moon falling from the sky. Like
okay.
Typical disaster movie.
Yeah.
And but there is a car chase scene in that film. I mean, go figure. In a disaster movie, there is a car chase. But okay, as if that isn't ridiculous enough. But okay, and then you have like two cars chasing each other, right? And there is like the car that's chasing the other car is like starts shooting, and then the person sitting next to the driver in the car that is being chased looks out the window, and it's like, and he screams at the driver, "They're shooting at us," and it's like, I know. I literally see. I mean, come on. Do you think I'm dumb? I mean, I can see, I can make it out for myself. Come on. So it's like, it's something like that. It's show don't tell, and but I agree, Alain Delon, and just, Alain Delon does an amazing job anyway in this film. It's really great. But now that you mentioned it, let's just talk about the acting and some of the characters. And you already mentioned my favorite in this film. My favorite is Richard Conte as Nick Gusto in this film, because, he doesn't play the typical, sleazy mob banker or something that he usually does. But Nick is actually a very conflicted persona in this film. And on the one hand, he's very loyal, of course, to his fellow gangsters, mob leaders. But then he's quite sympathetic towards Tony as well, because we're spoiling anyway. I mean, obviously, the car bomb was meant for Tony. It's just that his wife and kid basically, they basically became collateral damage, I guess, and you can just see that Nick Gusto is not, that doesn't sit right with him, because that's so funny. He doesn't accept like innocent losses, and I think he also knows that, if it would have succeeded, I think Tony would have actually been quite okay with, if he did die in that moment. I think he probably would have been okay with that. And I think Nick feels that too, in a certain sense. So you can totally tell that Nick shows this sort of regret for Anna and the kid, of course. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it's interesting. We're talking about like Delon's acting style. I really like Richard Conte and all these like kind of post Godfather Italian films he did. I think he was in like The Boss and stuff like that. And he always is sort of like Delon. He's able to just convey a lot without like necessarily overacting or saying like a lot of words. So it's interesting that they would cast him as kind of like the main villain here, when him and Delon are both have the same sort of like underacting style. But yeah, no, I think he's really good here. Like all of the other mob bosses are like kind of dialed up to 11, and they're kind of ridiculous and absurd. Like they're meeting in like these underwater like strip clubs, stuff like that. There's all these 70s clubs, and Conte seems just sort of like Delon. He seems a little bit above it. He seems a little more dignified. So they do a good job at that, because he feels like the only one that's really like a worthy foe to Tony's character.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to say the other character I really love in this film is Carla Gravina, who plays Sandra. And we talked about strong female characters before, but she is just such a kind of loving, but kind of naive individual who is, of course, Tony's best friend here. Besides Marc Porel's character Domenico, who is, but I think, equally as likable. But I think Sandra is great, and in a way, she also tries to be a voice of reason for Tony, I feel like, in this film. But I think one of the best things for me is that you can clearly tell that she and Tony were you can tell that they were a thing before Tony got married. It's just all in the air. I mean, they clearly had like romantic afflictions or whatever before Tony got married to his wife and stuff. And but again, and we talked about this in Short Night of Glass Dolls, but she remains just such a strong and loyal friend to Tony. without intruding on him or whatever. I mean, there is a lovely scene in which Sandra is sort of reluctant to accompany Tony to his parents' house, basically, out of fear that they are going to, perceive her basically as kind of like a replacement for Anna, and she doesn't want anything to do with that. And I think that's just so graceful for her to handle that situation. So yeah, that's how do you feel about the character of Sandra?
Yeah, no, I think she does a good job too. Yeah, I mean, she it's a tough role because like the women in this film are really get pretty abused for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Like they get bombed, they get beaten, they get abused, and she definitely has some of that happen to her. But yeah, they do a good job with not necessarily a ton of material for her. And I mean, maybe that's the strength of her, Gravina, as well as Delon's just kind of chemistry without necessarily saying a lot of words. Because, yeah, you do kind of feel that like mutual appreciation of each other and that just sort of chemistry with them. And so I'm not really someone that gets emotionally impacted too much by most, I would say 99% of films. But this one actually does get me a bit, just like that relationship, as well as just kind of the bombing that happens at the beginning. They're just so well executed and done in kind of like the acting style that I like, that they do work pretty well for me, at least.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking specifically about getting emotionally attached, but I mean there are, for me anyway, there are definitely scenes that touch me from time to time.
Sure.
And I think Tony Arzenta has a lot of those, especially with Sandra and Tony in there. So yeah, so that's I think, but overall, I think the acting in this film is just great. It's top notch, everyone. So what else do you have, like, more positives for Tony Arzenta?
Yeah, I do. There's a couple cool car chases in this too. I thought there's two of them. There's one in Copenhagen and one in, I think, Milan. Both are pretty awesome, as one might expect. I don't know if Julien Remy was involved in this film or not. I couldn't find that out.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense because it's so good. I just love those European cars from the 70s flying around, running into other stuff. And it just seems like they're little death boxes that waiting to happen.
Exactly.
So I like that kind of just sense of danger where they're like driving around these really old European streets and stuff like that. So that for me is it's a lot of fun, and it's just very exciting to see that happen. So that's another thing that did stand out. Let's see what else. I thought just kind of the whole, maybe the score a little bit, but also I this time I haven't felt this the last couple times I watched it, but this time I felt like there was just a little bit of kind of Godfather influence running through this. And part of that is because I think they cast 3 people from The Godfather, Conte, as well as Delon's dad in here, and the priest. I think those guys are all in The Godfather. And just kind of the way that they orchestrate kind of like that final death, spoiling the film again, Delon's death at the end with like this big wedding. And so that's very Godfather-ish, how you have like a baptism or something. So that's another thing that really stood out for me, at least, on this watch that I hadn't previously picked up on.
Right. Well, we'll get to the ending in a bit, because I have something to say about that. But
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, Remy Julien has his work cut out for this one, because, like you said, we don't get one, but we get 2 car chases here. One, of course, one is shorter than the other one, but and we actually get a flying car as well in this film. So there is that. I mean, I don't know how Remy Julien, did all this stuff, but or managed to survive all of this. But it really speaks to the craft about it, and it's just, and he does some pretty bonkers car crashes and all of that. So yeah, it's we talked about it last time in what we did, what have they done to your daughters, and it's. you know, what that movie kind of missed for me anyway, it makes up in spades in this one. So you know, you get plenty of car crash stuff. So yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like you said, there is also, of course, the really brilliant train scene. You know, that we already talked about. Great action scene there. Yeah, this movie just has great action throughout. I think in the moments that it has. So yeah, absolutely. It's that's one of the positives for me as well about this film. And of course, we have a car blowing up at the start of it. Yep. You know, as well, car bomb. So you know, there's that. So yeah, the effects
done too. I think they did a good job with the car bombing as well. Just the way they orchestrate that, and they just kind of make you wait. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. But yeah, the way that they trick you, that really works. It's like, you know, the one car doesn't start, so you have to get the key for the other one. And you think about, oh, the bomb is in that car, but then, oh no, it's in the other one. So you know, that really works. So yeah. But no, I mean, the action is great, and Remy Julien does some great work in this one for sure. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think I pretty much had all of my positives there. I do have have some issues that I want to talk about, but before I do you have any more positives about Tony Arzenta?
Let's see. All right, last one I have is I also like how the revenge is actually a fairly passive revenge. Like a lot of the hits are like the hit, for instance, in Copenhagen is like starts out where they tried to assassinate him in the square, and he just kind of turns it on his head, and it like he basically starts running towards the Copenhagen mob boss and ends up assassinating him, and some like great kind of jumping and stuff. So I like how they kind of twist it. It's where it's really kind of like he's a very wary revenge taker. He doesn't have a lot of like he doesn't necessarily really want to do it, but it's kind of forced on him. So I like that too.
Right. No, it's almost like he stumbles into revenge, you know, a bit. Yeah. He doesn't really want to do it, but he kind of has to survive. So yeah, that makes I agree. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And that's I think that's another great character beat of just, you know, Tony himself. I think it says a lot about Tony himself as well. So no, that's great. That's great. So do you have anything more?
I do not. That's most of my thoughts.
Okay, so I would like to start with because I do have. It's not like it's one big issue I have, and we already like discussed this a little bit, but I'm really going to go into it now. You know, because we already talked about the church scene and stuff, the wedding and stuff. And you know, even though I really dig my downbeat and depressing endings, I mean, like I get I'm you know, Silent Action. I think I wrote a review about that once in like a column or whatever, and I gave it a 10 out of 10. So you know, and Silent Action is probably the most depressing Poliziotteschi out there. So you know, it's you know, I can really dig that stuff, but for some strange reason, I don't like how this movie closes off.
Oh, interesting.
Because here's the thing. You know, like I said, he sort of stumbles into revenge. He doesn't really want to do it, right? And after everything that he went through, I guess I wanted sort of, you know, I guess I wanted Tony's peace deal with the mob that they do at the end. I really wanted that to work out somehow, and I guess I wanted to see him sort of live happily with his parents and maybe even Sandra in the end. I don't know. I guess this is one of the few times where I don't like the depressing downbeat ending. if that makes sense. Like, how do you see that? What's your take on that?
I actually like the ending for almost the exact same reason, just because like I would have been perfectly satisfied with kind of the ending that you outlined, a more happy one. But I like how at the end where it's like they have to come out of it at him at this sort of unexpected way where like Nick Gusto is almost betraying his own code, where he's doing this thing that like Tony Arzenta wouldn't expect him to actually do. And then that's just kind of how it ends really abruptly. Where you have like this guy that seems to have a little more dignity and is a little above it, and you actually honestly believe that he wants peace. But yeah, sort of like The Godfather, though, it's like these characters who you've come to like are capable of these like very despicable kind of like hits and stuff at like these kind of sentimental moments. So I was like, ooh, that's really cruel and a little twisted, but I actually like it. Yeah. So that's kind of where I land on it.
No, I mean, that's totally fair. I get it. That's totally fair. I don't know. Maybe the thing for me is that, like, I think I would have expected Nick Gusto to eventually choose his friendship with Tony over his sort of mob code, if you will, or his mob allegiance. That's kind of what I was hoping for. But I mean, I get it. They have to make a point, right? I mean, the mob does anyway in this film. They have to make a point, and so it's a natural, consequence of everything that has been happening. I don't know. I guess it was just wishful thinking for my part. Like, I would at least like to have one of these Poliziotteschi have like a bit of a happy ending, but.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it's also like his friend from Denmark that does it too, which is like the one that. Well, question for you. Is that like Nick Gusto's daughter's wedding?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think she's like, what the hell, Dad? He killed someone at my wedding. What's wrong with you? Like 30 years later, she's like, remember that one time that Dad killed Tony at the wedding?
Exactly. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like when they shoot, Tony gets shot, of course, and then we cut to Nick Gusto on the stairs and stuff, and then he freeze frames it, and we don't even really see the reaction of the daughter and stuff. It's like, yeah, we get Sandra, I believe, and we get his parents, but and of course Nick, you can clearly see Nick, in the facial expressions, but that's another thing. It's like we don't really get to see like these people's reactions to what eventually happens. Yeah, I know it is what it is, I guess. I mean, it's not like, I mean, it's not like a big negative, but it's like something like I said, it's kind of like wishful thinking. Like, just give me the happy ending just one time, please. One time. That's okay. But it's, it is what it is. So yeah, that's basically my only negative of this film. The only one I have. But do you have any issues with Tony Arzenta?
I honestly don't. It's like a little longer, but for the most part, I'm kind of okay with the runtime. Usually when like these Poliziotteschi run closer to 2 hours, I'm like, oh, you should have cut like 10 minutes or 15. But I kind of like the runtime, and I think it kind of serves it well. So yeah, I don't have really any negatives to bring up.
Okay, fair enough. Because this movie runs for, what is it again? Like,
it's like 114.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think so. It's like 1 hour and 40 minutes, something like that. I think something like that, right?
Yeah, 113. So 1 hour and 53. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good runtime, I feel like. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of Poliziotteschi though that have like 2 hour run times. I think most of them stick to like 90 minutes. I think.
I would say so.
Yeah. Which is a good runtime, I feel like. But yeah, this didn't feel long at all. It didn't feel long, absolutely. So yeah. So okay, well, if you don't have any more issues with it, I guess we could go into ratings.
Sure.
All right. So would you like to start? Should I?
I can go first. Okay. Yeah, I like this film quite a bit. So I gave it a 8.5.
Okay. You're very close to mine, actually. Yeah, Tony. I mean, like I said, this is like one of my favorite Poliziotteschi in the genre, in the subgenre. Tony Arzenta, also called No Way Out or Big Guns or whatever the other 5 titles are of this film. But no, I mean, this film is really great. I mean, it's really good. And apart from that negative that I mentioned, I mean, this is one of my favorites. Absolutely. So I'll give it a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
It's really great. This is really great. So okay. So that was Tony Arzenta. I guess we can move over to the next one, which is Death Occurred Last Night, of course, which was released earlier in 1970. Again, quick synopsis: a compassionate police captain searches for a mentally challenged 25-year-old daughter of a widower who has been kidnapped and forced into prostitution. Yeah, that's basically it. So, Death Occurred Last Night. First of all, by the way, I don't know how you have seen it, but I have this one from, this is from Raro Video. So, there you go. They're actually, it's a partner label to Radiance, actually. So.
Okay, nice. So, I watched this on a streaming service we have here called Tubi. So.
On Tubi. Okay, yeah. So. But anyway, I have this one from Raro Video, and it looks the picture quality again. The picture quality is great. So but yeah, I think another interesting film in the Poliziotteschi subgenre. Like I said, released in 1970. It's very different from Tony Arzenta, though. Quite different, I feel like. So, again, before we go into positives and negatives and stuff, let's just get started. What are some of your general thoughts about Death Occurred Last Night?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one just because I feel like it doesn't neatly fit as well into the Italian genres at the time. Like, you could sort of slot it into the Poliziotteschi, you could also sort of slot it into Giallo, but it's a little bit early for both of those. And I think it kind of happens where it almost owes a little bit more to like the German creamy films than it does to like Dario Argento, just in terms of its procedural aspects. So yeah, it was interesting because I'd seen this years ago. And so it's interesting to just kind of swing back and revisit it. And then knowing a lot more of kind of like the timeline of Italian film, especially around this era, just seeing how kind of what sorts of films were being made. I wouldn't say I love this film, but yeah. Anyway, so we can talk about that as we get more into the details.
Right. No, I mean, I wouldn't say I love this either. I mean, I like it, but I wouldn't say I love it, and not on the level of Tony Arzenta. But you know what's funny? Do you know what this movie reminds me of, kind of? This movie, I think you could easily, if Damiano Damiani directed this film, it would have been a great fit. Because I think, I've watched quite a few Damiano Damiani films right now, and what I find interesting about those is that they are almost like the precursor or the proto Poliziotteschi, where they're more story driven and they don't have as much action. They're a little bit more politically charged, maybe even. But and don't get me wrong, I mean, I love Damiani's films, but I just find the contrast very interesting when you compare it to this, because this, I feel like, would fit very well into that category. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I hadn't considered that, but that would make a lot of sense, just because Damiani was making these sorts of films like in the late 60s. So this coming out right in 1970 would make a bit of sense. And I feel like he probably, would have done a little bit of a better job, just more well suited towards the material in terms of like approaching it from a clearer, maybe socio-political angle than Tessari does. I think it sort of hints at it, and it does have some stuff to say, but I think it would have been probably a little more pointed, have a little bit more sharper edges to it if you had someone like Damiani coming in and directing this. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're pretty spot on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, that was just an observation I made when I watched it now. But well, I have a lot to say about the actual story of this film, but I'm sure we'll get to it. So yeah, like I said, I think this is a very interesting film. I mean, I like it, but it doesn't have as much of a soft spot in my heart as Tony Arzenta does. But I still think it's a very enjoyable film. So let's just dive into it. Let's just start with positives again. What are some of the things that you appreciate about Death Occurred Last Night?
Yeah, I mean, I thought in terms of like kind of its more, what's the right angle? Like its human emotions and stuff like that. I thought it was pretty effective. Like the Ralph Vallone character is like the dad. I think that's the correct area. Yeah. And also the kind of like the main detective, Frank Wolff. I think it was uncommonly focused on the characters in a way that, like, you know, these giallos after Argento probably would not be. Like if this film comes out 1 year later, they probably add just like 3 more random killings or 3 or 4 because like they need that bloodlust just because like the bird with the crystal plumage. I think this film came out after Bird with the Crystal Plumage, but they probably didn't have enough time to add those sorts of things into the film. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate how it's a little more kind of grounded and story driven. And I like both the leads, Vallone as well as Frank Wolff, I think is a pretty solid actor as well. So those are some of the things that kind of top of mind come off as like being pluses for this movie.
Right. No, I mean, if you let me just continue on that one. I mean, you're right. I mean, I agree with you. You're right. That's a good point. This movie is almost more like a character study than, like you said, than your typical giallo, where it's like more like focused on the killings and the gore and stuff, which I think makes it a very interesting take on the genre in particular. But in terms of the acting and the cast, I mean, I think the cast in this movie is great. Especially, I think Frank Wolff. I think he nails it in this film. Frank Wolff, I think, is really good as Detective Lamberti. And I really love his camaraderie, with Inspector Mascaranti. I probably butchered that, but his sort of like his co-worker, basically, played by Gabriele Tinti, of course. But I love that camaraderie. It's very buddy cop-like, in a certain way.
Yeah.
Where, they have this thing about, handing out cigarettes at a certain time of the day. Like, every time he shows his watch, it's like, give me my cigarettes. And there's also this constant joke of, about Mascaranti having to take a haircut for some strange reason.
Yeah.
It was like, well, your hair looks great. What are you talking about? But it's like, it's moments like that. And I really love that sort of like buddy cop element of it. So yeah, I think the acting is pretty much great in this. And you mentioned the bird with the crystal plumage. There is a little link here because Eva Renzi's in this film.
I know.
Playing Frank Wolff's wife, of course.
Yeah.
Which is a very different role from the bird with the crystal plumage. But, it's...
maybe they should have done the same twist in this one. It was her all along.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, she could have been she could have taken the role of the crazy neighbor in the end, but we'll get to that. So but yeah, I think the cast overall is pretty great. And I have to say this thing, it's a positive for me, but it's also a negative. So let me start with the positive. I think I quite love the story, actually, of this film, because it bears some familiarity with what they have done to your daughters, actually, in a strange way, I feel like. This whole thing about, a kidnapped child being forced into prostitution. It's just that we talked about that before in the last podcast, but it's just such a gross story beat to use as a plot element. I mean, in the best way possible, because it works on your emotions, of course, in a certain way. Especially when you add like the whole, of course, the girl is mentally ill, and Donatella is possibly autistic, maybe. I think maybe in a certain way, or a borderline or whatever.
Sure.
But so that adds another element of it. But I think the scenes between Donatello and her father, Amenzio, that you already mentioned, those scenes are so beautiful. I mean, the few that you get to see, those scenes are so beautiful. I think they are wonderfully done. And I mean, nowadays people would call those sexist or gross or whatever. Because he's dressing her, of course, with of course he sees her, he sees her body parts, let's just say that. But nowadays people would probably say that's sexist or whatever. But I think those scenes are just so wonderful. I mean, so what how do you feel about that? What's your take on the story of the film?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because like it's early on that sort of storyline. I mean, you're spot on that this is kind of like what takes a very similar angle to like, what have they done to your daughters, but also suspicious death of your minor, calling all police cars, like those kind of hybrid Gialli Poliziotteschi. But those films were all like, I think 1974, 1975, and this film is 1970. So the earlier take, I mean, this feels pretty different from, I think, those films, which I think are a little more rompy at times and probably lean a little bit more heavily into Poliziotteschi. But yeah, I mean, I think it's at first when they had that scene where like the daughter is like nude and he's helping her dress, I was like, oh, what is this exactly? Because I'm like kind of looking at it in like a 2025 lens, like, oh, actually it's meant to be kind of just like this like tender moment between like father and daughter. That's just kind of due to her mental condition. That's just the reality. And so I realized it was actually playing it very earnestly. And yeah, I mean, I think both the actress that plays Donatella as well as her dad do a good job at that kind of relationship. And I think that core of the film really does work quite well, where you do end up caring. And the film is in many ways fairly ambitious in the way that it's kind of cut together, where it keeps like cutting back to that and it has kind of like that more tender music playing. I found it to be surprisingly effective. Like that's not usually the sort of technique that is going to work on me super well, but I thought it worked pretty well, honestly.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree. And it's and again, it's just again not necessarily like emotionally attached, but it touches certain, it touches you in certain ways. And it's and they again, it's just it's really lovely, and it's like you said, it's reality. I mean, like it's of course he is like more of an adult kid, but like I mean, I wouldn't know, but I mean, my parents probably used to do that a lot. Like they dress. When you're younger, you get dressed by your parents and stuff. So it's like
Sure.
that's a very natural thing. So it's like I actually don't really mind that at all, especially in the context of the story and stuff. So, but to add on that, you already mentioned it. I think this movie has an amazing score by Gianni Ferrio, who I'm not really too familiar with his work. Actually, I don't know which films he did, which other films he did, but
yeah, he did the other film we talked about too, Tony Arzenta. So.
Really? Yeah. I guess I missed that. Oh, what do you know? Okay, well there you go. Okay,
did a good job on both. In my opinion.
Yeah, big job. Well, I mean, they have certain resemblances, of course, because I mean, this soundtrack has a very jazzy feel to it. It's almost like you're listening to jazz music. Which just adds to the fun factor of the film. I feel like it makes it a little bit more lighthearted. I feel like, And I think my favorite piece of music is actually, and by the way, I love this moment, is when the movie begins, which again is kind of reminiscent of Short Night of Glass Dolls, where you have, as the camera takes us through, the city of Milan on a tram car, and it's like, and you hear this woman singing and stuff, and you have this jazzy music.
Yeah. I was about to say the exact same thing. I love that use of music. It's the most memorable. And for me, it had actually been like a few weeks or so I was out of town. So I hadn't seen like Italian films recently. I was like, oh, wow, this film is just like a vibe. And it's good to be back in this like vibe of like this cool music and just kind of like trolling, like going on through the streets of Italy. So yeah, I loved it. It just brought me right back.
Yeah. And it's one day I'm going to I'm going to probably take half a year off, probably from work or whatever. When I saved up enough money, I'm going on a road trip through Italy. I'm just going to see all of these places. but the reminiscence of Short Night of Glass Dolls, I think it was there because again, on the tram car, and you just go through the whole city of Milan. Which is just gorgeous to look at. It's almost like DUCCIO takes you on a sort of slideshow with like, all of these pictures of Milan. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at this. It's very, I think it's very effective. So
yeah, thinking about it too, he really likes Milan too. I think Bloodstained Butterfly is also Milan, if I remember right. And that's a very, he kind of like shows a very kind of foggy side of that as well. Sort of like, that scene in Tony Arzenta. So it's interesting to see him kind of just go back to the well there several times.
Right. And I think what you can say about DUCCIO Tessari is that he's unoriginal because you mentioned the Bloodstained Butterfly. I mean, that's a giallo that basically turns into a courtroom drama. So
true.
Yeah. So the one thing you can't blame him for is being unoriginal. So but yeah, I think that was like shot in Milan as well. Yeah.
That's what I remember. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what else can you say about Death Occurred Last Night that you admire or appreciate?
Yeah, I mean, I always like the kind of like more procedural films, just as kind of like a structure, and that's something that like Argento I think was probably responsible for moving the genre away from, like more of like the cops are the protagonists. So it's interesting that you pointed out like there's almost like a buddy cop element, because that's like you'd think for a genre that's like built on mystery and things like that, that'd be like kind of a key component to giallo, but it's really not. It's really like they really like more like, oh, it's an American tourist or it's like some outsider in this thing and they have to solve the murder for themselves. So I think that's something that did stand out, and I think I do end up liking that kind of like that approach. Not that I dislike the kind of more Argento approach. It just does feel a little bit different than kind of like what we're used to as far as like the giallo tropes.
Right. No, I mean, I like I said before, I like the buddy cop thing, and it's I mean, DUCCIO Tessari, he doesn't use it as effectively as Ruggiero Deodato does in Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man, because that movie is basically the whole thing is basically a buddy cop comedy, basically sort of action comedy, but I don't think he does it as well as Ruggiero Deodato does, but the stuff that he does in this film, it really works for me. Yeah, I mean it has kind of like an uplifting quality about it, I feel like.
Yeah. The characters feel like real people in this one, like the Wolff character and his partner Mascarante and his girlfriend. So yeah, I appreciate that aspect.
Yeah, but and again, the Lamberti and his wife also have a very just loving, normal relationship, which is also something that you don't see very often in films like this. I love the moment with Lamberti and Mascarante as well, where he basically is like, I just wanted you to know that I'm resigning. I'm giving over my badge because now I'm not, constricted to law, and now I can beat this guy up right here to get information out of it. and then Lamberti is basically saying, like, I appreciate you for what you're doing here, but you're not. I didn't accept your resignation, so here's your badge. And he's like, oh my, I'm so sorry. Like, it's like, it's stuff like that. I love that.
Yeah.
That works very well. So I think I pretty much covered all of my positives here. Do you have any more positives for this one?
No, I think I have a lot less on this film than Arzenta, so I think that's most of it for me.
Okay. So I do have some issues with this, as I'm sure you do. You know what? Why don't you start? What are some of the issues that you have with this film?
I think you pointing out kind of like what Damiani would have done with this film kind of highlights a lot of it. I just feel like it's not quite really razor sharp on like what it wants to focus on. Like it's sort of like partly procedural and stuff like that. And it sort of works. Like I don't dislike this film. I mostly like this film, but I do feel like someone like Damiani could have like cut to the core and be like, we're going to really take a look at like kind of the exploitation and this like prostitution ring. And he'd probably also be like, who is actually behind this? It wouldn't be like a group of like kind of like random thugs or something like that. It'd be like more of an institutional systemic thing. And I think if it had something like that, I think it would be maybe perhaps a little more memorable or cut a little bit deeper as far as the film goes. So that's one thing. There's not like a lot that I necessarily dislike about the film. It is a little slow at points. Part of that is because it's not quite the Argento mode of it, but I don't really want to hold that against the film because, it came out when it did. And I don't think that's like necessarily an inherent flaw. But if you look at it as like a giallo and I want my great set pieces and my kills, you're not going to get that in this movie.
No, exactly. Like you said, this is almost more like a character study and stuff like that. And, just maybe like a murder mystery more or something more like that along the lines of that. But we actually have very similar issues here. Because the first thing for me is that, like you said, I feel like this film does have some pacing issues. And sometimes I feel like it has trouble with the format of Tessari's script, if that makes sense. Anyway, I mean, it tries to balance all of these elements. Like, you have the humor, you have the dramatic element, and then you have, of course, the sort of the crime thriller, the more serious notes on it, and it tries to balance all of these things. And in my opinion, it doesn't always work that well. I mean, does it make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think I would agree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and the other thing that you already mentioned as well is that, here's the thing. And I feel like Massimo Dallamano, that's what I was trying to say. I think he does it better. They don't really explain as much as to why Donatella is the specific girl to be chosen by these handlers. And in what have they done to your daughters? Dallamano makes it actually quite clear that these are sex traffickers, and kids are kind of like the new fashion for all of these disgusting perverts and all of that stuff. Dallamano makes that very clear in his film. What have they done for your daughter to your daughters? But in this picture, I mean, they sort of skid by that. Which was kind of odd to me, and and I have to ask, like, I guess I just wanted a more clear answer on that. I mean, like, why this troubled, insecure girl specifically? why did you want this girl? And I feel like they don't really give you a definitive answer to that, which makes it kind of frustrating for me. I mean, what's your take on that?
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like Dallamano or Damiani, they both would like kind of look a layer up and be like, who is really to blame? So this one takes like a little bit more of the easier answer where like the only real explanation you could come up with that is like, these people are just kind of stupid and picked randomly and like didn't even like, I mean, it didn't even work out for them really. Cause it's like, they ended up being like, oh, this girl's a pain in the ass. Let's just kill her instead. So it's like, okay. It's like not, I feel like they could have done better, with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Especially I've like you kidnap this girl that seems so important, and then you discover that she has all of these annoying things, and then it's like, she's not really that interesting. Oh well, we just kill her, whatever. I don't know. It just it's like I said. I think Dallamano does a far better job at like really laying that groundwork of like how that whole world and those circles work within sex trafficking and all of that.
But like all those later Gialli Poliziotteschi that are usually on the exploitation of minors, I feel like they do a good job of kind of exploring that ecosystem of that underworld a lot better. It's like, oh, here's the market for it too, and it does a little here, but really not enough.
Right. No, exactly. So we kind of have the same issues here, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean that those are my two. If I have to give like two big things that don't really work for me, it's those kind of elements. That doesn't mean necessarily that we'll get to our ratings in a bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a bad film or anything, because I don't think it is. I think it's like you said, quite enjoyable still. But I think if they had like worked over the script and tightened things up a little bit in certain areas, I think it could have turned out better. And I don't really know at which point in his career DUCCIO Tessari made this. I do know that Tony Arzenta was pretty late in his career, but I don't exactly know at which point in his career this came along, Death Occurred Last Night. But it's it's kind of rough around the edges a bit, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he did it just 3 years before Tony Arzenta, but in between he did direct like 4 or 5 films. I mean, those Italians were really cranking him out at that time. So
yeah. You can't blame you can't say they weren't efficient back then in filmmaking. No. It's like we have to give you at least 3 movies every year or whatever. So it's but yeah. So yeah, I think we have the same sort of issues that about this film. So so do you have anything more to say on Death Occurred Last Night?
I don't. Yeah, I just don't have that much on this film.
Right. Okay, so we can go into ratings again. So do you want to start with again, or should I?
I can go. I gave this film a 6.5.
Oh, okay, you're lower than me actually. I 6.5, right? You said okay. Yeah. That's fair. I feel like that's fair. Like, I mean, Death Occurred Last Night. I think it's still a interesting film in terms of just filmmaking itself. It is quite enjoyable for me anyway. I mean, there are a lot of things that work for me in this film. I don't want to like beat it down completely. I mean, there are things in here that I really appreciate. But the bigger issues really stick out, and again, I feel like a lot of things resemble a lot of like sort of like topics and story beats that we also get to see in later films. So yeah, I mean it's but I still, at the end of the day, I still enjoy this film. I can still have fun with watching it. But it's nowhere near as good as Tony Arzenta, of course. So I'm a little higher than you. I'm going to give it a 7.5
Okay.
out of 10. It's because I just, I said this before in another podcast. I just, you know what I really appreciate about sort of the Italian European cinema in general is that I like good filmmaking, and you can't say that these two films are not good filmmaking
Yeah.
on a technical sort of aspect, because I think they are.
Yeah, and on that note too, it's like unfortunately the Tubi copy I watched was not as good as I had hoped. I was hoping it would be from the Blu-ray. So it's possible that you watch this films, and I love cinematography as an aspect. So it's like if you kind of just can make those colors a little richer and watch in better definition, I could see myself definitely coming up closer to perhaps where you are too.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's why I give it a little bit of a notch. 7.5. That's my rating for it. So, decent film, but nowhere near on the quality as Tony Arzenta. So, which I guess, I mean, they can't all be as great as that, I guess.
Yeah.
So, see, it is what it is. It is what it is. So, those were the two movies that we were going to discuss. I think we have a little bit of time left, do we? Right?
We do, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, in case we did have some time left, I thought of a little topic on the side here before I let you go, because I know you have places to be. So as like a closing thing to ask you before I let you go. Because usually I ask this at the start of it, but we haven't talked about it. What was actually your first exposure to DUCCIO TESSARI? And if you would have to recommend one movie to like new audiences, what kind of movie of DUCCIO TESSARI would you recommend?
My first film with him was definitely A Pisto for Ringo. The Giuliano Gemma film, which I think is a pretty good spaghetti western. It's been over 10 years since I've seen it, so it's been a hot second there.
It's a bit more comedic, right?
Sorry, what?
It's a bit more comedic, right?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's like mid-60s. Gemma.
Yeah.
I mean, he did both of those Ringo films, which I think Arrow Video or someone has released. I've been intending to revisit those for quite some time. But probably my recommendation for people would be one of the films we covered, Tony Arzenta, just because I think that is by a decent margin kind of like my favorite that I've seen from DUCCIO TESSARI.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, that's an interesting choice. I would too. But I think the other one that I would recommend to people, because I feel like it's such a original film within the genre, I would recommend the Bloodstained Butterfly, because again, like I said, it's kind of like a giallo film that turns into a courtroom drama, and you don't see that a lot within the giallo subgenre. Which makes it very unique. I believe that film has Silvano Tranquilli as the main character, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, I rewatched that last year. Yeah. Another good one too, Puzzle. I like that one as well.
Puzzle's pretty great as well. Yeah. But by the way, Silvano Tranquilli is another great actor there. But yeah, I think, and I think the Bloodstained Butterfly is a bit underrated as well. I think it gets sort of lost in translation a bit. So I would recommend that. But, Tony Arzenta is probably, it's probably the correct choice. I mean, if you want some fast-paced action stuff and, all of that, then you're probably in for the right one. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of like my final question that I wanted to ask. But I do own like you said, the Ringo. I do own that version of Arrow Video. They have both films on that. The Epistle for Ringo and The Return of Ringo, I believe it was.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, have you watched them?
And I believe those came at an era in which the spaghetti western was turning a more comedic side, some sort of. I mean, they're fun westerns to watch, but I mean, it's not like you're watching Django or whatever. So it's
Sure. Yeah,
that's a completely different level. But no, that's interesting. So so my recommendation is The Bloodstained Butterfly, and your recommendation is Tony Arzenta. So there we have it. That's that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we pretty much ran through that pretty quickly. We discussed everything we wanted to talk about, I think. So yeah, if there's nothing else, I think it's time we close off the stream so you can go to your other appointments, or I don't know what you're going to be doing, but we can close off the stream. So this has been another fun one. This was great. It was a lot of fun to revisit the Poliziotteschi genre. It's funny. There are so many titles in that genre, and sometimes you just forget about certain titles. It's kind of funny in that way,
Yeah. I mean, they all have like 5 too, which makes it just extra confusing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's not like it's not like the Italian science fiction films, which we don't want to talk about that much. But it's
yeah, I don't know if I want to talk about that much too.
No. That's pretty. Yeah. Let's not go there. But yeah, I mean, this was great. This was great to revisit these films and the genre itself. So one final thing before we close this off, to people who haven't seen you yet, maybe, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can check out my YouTube channel, Italian Poliziotteschi and Gialli Reviews. Do maybe half reviews and half kind of like videos just covering different topics around those. So yeah, it's just mostly a for fun channel. So yeah, just go check it out.
There you go. So check out his channel, give him a like, subscribe to his channel, because I think I said it before, but you make really great and interesting videos. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And hopefully we can do another one of these in the near future.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. Sounds good. Because these are a lot of fun. So anyway, with all of that down, I think it's time we close this off. Once again, thank you everyone for watching and listening. I'll be back with more videos as soon as possible, of course. The first one will probably be my vlog video for HorrorCon in the UK. I'm attending that one, which is going to be a wild weekend, but I will probably do a vlog on that sooner rather than later when it's done. Stay tuned and healthy. Stay safe and healthy as always. Stay tuned for more videos as they come along the way. Have a good weekend, and I see and talk to everyone very soon. So, bye, everyone. And James, thank you.
Yep, thank you. A lot of fun.
Bye. Yeah, bye. This was fun. See ya.